Well, hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us today for this panel discussion in which we'll be talking about how we charge the future towards the electrification of transportation. My name is Nino Di Cara. I'm the founder and president of Electric Autonomy Canada, which is the news media at the centre of Canada's transition to the adoption of electric and autonomous vehicles. I'm delighted to introduce you to our excellent panel who are with us here today. They are Emmanuel Toussaint, Vice President, Legal, Regulatory and Public Affairs and External Communications at Volvo Group. David Patterson, Vice President, Corporate and Environmental Affairs, General Motors of Canada Company. And joining us remotely, but no less connected to the discussion, Frederic Morsi, Vice President, Services, Schneider Electric Canada. And Paul Soubry, Chief Executive Officer of New Flyer Industries. I'd like to invite the panelists to introduce themselves individually. So, Emmanuel, if I could invite you first.
Thank you, Nino. So, as just mentioned, I'm in charge of public affairs and legal at Novabus and Prevost. We are part of the Volvo Group. At Novabus, we design and manufacture transit buses for more than 25 years. We offer all type of transit buses, diesel, electric, hybrid, and also CNG buses. We are established in the province of Quebec. We have two facilities there, one in Saint-François-du-Lac, where we built all the structure for the buses for Canada and for the US. And we also have our main facility in Saint-Eustache, where we assemble the vehicle. And we have a third facility in Plattsburgh, New York, where we are in Plattsburgh for more than 10 years now. So as part of the Volvo Group, we are really the brand for transit buses in Canada and in the US.
Thank you, Emmanuel. And we'll go online now and invite Frederic.
Yes, so thank you very much, Nino, and hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to participate to the exchange today on this very important subject, for sure, for our Canadian economy. Schneider Electric, in few words, our core expertise is energy management and automation at the service of efficiency and sustainability. The core mission of Schneider Electric is to be the best digital partner for our customer and helping them to make the most of their energy. So Schneider Electric is a global company, and we have a very important footprint in Canada. We have over 2,100 employees in the country. We have 4 global R&D centers. We have 3 factories where we're manufacturing electrical equipment for the Canadian market. We have 29 regional offices in close proximity to all our customers across the country. So at the heart of what we're doing at Schneider Electric is really helping our customer in their digital and sustainability journey. To give you an example, in the last 2 years, Schneider Electric, thanks to our services and our technology, we have helped our customer reducing their carbon emission by 120 million metric tons of CO2. Climate change remains what we believe to be the biggest challenge of our generation. And in light of the subject today and the decarbonization effort that is happening here in the country and around the world, Schneider Electric is taking part of several electrification of transport projects around the world, offering energy management, equipment and technology, but more importantly, helping our customers solving this very complex energy infrastructure needs, helping them in the design, build, and operation of the electrification of their transport, electrification of their fleet. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity today.
Thank you, Frederic. And Paul.
Thanks. My name's Paul Soubry at Edify Group. That's the parent company, the publicly traded company for some really cool historic bus and motor coach brands, New Flyer Industries, Motor Coach Industries, Arbach Specialty Vehicles, and the world leader in double deck called Alexander Dennis. A Winnipeg story, headquartered in Winnipeg with building buses and vehicles all the way back to 1930. And our approach to life has been to be broad in product and offering, but also deep in propulsion. And so we offer vehicles that are natural gas, that are clean diesel, hybrid electric, fuel cell electric, battery electric, and trolley electric. About 8,000 people and about 105,000 vehicles on the road. About 20% of our productive capacity this year is dedicated to zero emission production. And our whole view on this story is that we need to help our customers beyond just the vehicle. It's an ecosystem, whether it's the vehicle, the charging, the professional people development, and everything associated with maintenance going forward. Really excited to be part of the panel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Paul. And David.
Thanks, Dino. David Patterson. I'm Vice President of Corporate and Environmental Affairs for General Motors Canada. And I get to work with our global team of experts in the environment and public policy. And General Motors won't be strange to you, but it's a really exciting time in the auto industry right now. General Motors Canada has been part of this country for over 100 years. We started off with Colonel Sam McLaughlin and his family that made horse-drawn carriages in Oshawa. And flash forward 100 years later, we're still here and part of the most fascinating transformation right now in technology in our history since we left horses behind. And so we have a number of plants here in Canada. We're going to be the first to transform one of our auto sector plants to a fully electric plant starting next year, where we are going to be producing cargo vans, fully electric cargo vans. It's a new brand for GM called Bright Drop, servicing companies like FedEx, delivering those packages that come to our door, doing it in a fully electric way, and with some very cool innovations that were developed here in Canada to help cut our customers' costs up to about 30% in the delivery of those packages to the door as well. So lots of change, lots of disruption, and I look forward to the conversation about all of that, Neil.
That's great. Well, it's great hearing the history of the horses and buggies and carts. And obviously that was a time of great change and transition when we went to combustion. And our predecessors managed it successfully, and it's now incumbent upon us in this generation to make it successfully towards electrification. So I think that's a very nice point. Well, as you all very well know, we're living in a climate crisis, and our actions matter more than ever before. It's a message that governments around the world are increasingly recognizing, as to are the populations that they serve. Obviously, we've got COP26 happening in the background to this discussion. But regardless of the outcome of that and what our politicians decide, there's still a lot that businesses and industry can do to move this forward. And that's why I'm very pleased to be here with these industry leaders with us today. Manuel, perhaps we could start with you. Could you explain a little more about why electric vehicles are actually good in helping avert the climate crisis and how they help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Yeah, sure. So when we think about it, heavy-duty vehicle represent approximately, it's between 25% and up to 40% of the emission, depending of the city and of the country. So there's a lot of heavy-duty vehicle around us, but there's also the other type of vehicle. We are surrounded by individual cars. We have school buses, transit buses, trucks, boats, vacuum to clean the city. So all the traditional vehicle, they emit emission, of course, which is quite bad for the health. So when we take just one transit buses, it can easily replace 50 cars. And then if we make a step further, we think about electric buses, then the emission we can cut, it's about 100,000 kilogram of CO2 emission that equivalent that you can cut compared to a diesel bus. So it represents a huge advantage. And then if you add the circularity to it, so thinking about what are we doing with the battery, for example, so should we be reusing them, recycling them? Of course, yes. And at the Volvo Group, there's a new entity that has been created earlier this week. It's Volvo Energy. And the scope is really to make sure that the battery, once used, they can be recycled or refurbished, or if the battery is no longer viable, then we can really recycle the minerals, because the minerals also, if we just extract minerals all the time, we can question about the green efficiency of it. So all those things together, it can really change the air. And also when we think about all the kids, for example, that go around the buses, because of course I'm talking more about buses, but within the group we are all type of vehicle. We want to leave them, a cleaner society, a cleaner environment, and I think it's quite cool to have all those electric vehicles now.
I see it every morning when I drop my son off at school, the tailpipes outside the school gate, so I think I really appreciate that point. And Frederick, it would be great if you could perhaps elaborate on Emmanuel's answer and perhaps just highlight on some of the factors in particular about Canada's energy grid and to the extent to which we have clean power generation here.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I jump into what makes the energy landscape specific in Canada, I'd like to rebound to a point raised by Emmanuel. I think, in this race to climate change, if we're simply replacing the cars and the truck on the road with electrical vehicle, I think we have a greater opportunity collectively here to look at how the electrification of transport is a unique opportunity for us to change the way we transport people and our products to the final destination, and how we adapt our cities and the public transport offering to really make it more accessible and more efficient to use. The great news is that, of course, in Canada, we have a unique opportunity, as I said, because we've got a very advanced grid and grid interconnection across the country that are very strong. Also, what makes our industry quite unique is we have a very strong in-country supply chain. In fact, we have in Canada a full electricity value chain with expertise that have been creating and exporting values. A matter of fact is that there's a lot of innovation that have emerged in the electrical sector over the last 70, 100 years from Canada. And I feel this is a very important to take the word from Paul. This is the ecosystem that makes a difference in supporting this transition to the electrification of our transport in the country.
Thanks, Frederick. And David, an increasing number of automakers are committing to electrify their full lineups within the next couple of decades, and GM itself is committed to doing so in the next 14 years by 2035. What's required to make that transition happen? Obviously, making sure the vehicles and the supply is there, but what would you be looking for from governments to really help make this an attractive proposition for the public, but also other organizations who obviously own and operate vehicle fleets?
Yeah, I think in the light-duty vehicles, the cars and SUVs and trucks we buy and we need for our families, etc., there's enormous opportunity, but it sort of starts with us. We have to develop the technology so that we can continue to please our customers, have no excuses, be able to still put the hockey bag in the back of the car, still get the range. And so we have a lot of technology development in the industry that we need to do. And yes, we've set a date, 2035, that we will go all electric. In our light-duty fleet, all our vehicles will be electrified. And it's going to take that decade to introduce those vehicles and bring them forward. But and we've been a very regulated industry, probably the most on the planet. I don't worry about that so much. I really do worry, however, that we need to get people to make that shift, to make the change as individuals and decide, yes, electric's right for me, and now is the time to go, because there are some things that you need to do. Right now, the technology in most vehicles for a battery-driven EV is going to be in the range of $10,000 more. And even then, the auto companies are probably subsidizing that. So we have to bring our costs down of the batteries, which is the main driver of that cost. So our governments do need to help. And right now, for instance, in the United States, there's a very big bill going through that is putting a lot of money on the table to incentivize people to make this shift. In Canada, we have a federal incentive of $5,000. The incentive they're talking about in the States is 3 times that amount. And so that makes it very attractive for people to make the shift over to electric. But it's not just that, it's also our charging networks. And what our research shows us is that probably the biggest concern after the price of the electric vehicle is the range anxiety, or how will I be able to charge up? I live in an apartment building. I live in a condo. I live in a house that doesn't have a driveway. All these are real barriers for people. And then, can I drive to Montreal and back? Where do I stop? Do I have an app that tells me where to go? So we have a lot of things to work through with our customers. And governments have to help us build out that charging infrastructure. We just announced this week that we're going to invest in another 4,000 chargers across Canada, and about 10 times that number across the United States. But we're going to need governments to step up too. And frankly, in Canada, we're behind. And we're going to need to be more ambitious on charging and more ambitious on customer incentives if this is all going to work.
Thank you. And it seems to me that there's a point there that, correct me if this is a wrong interpretation, but in the early stages of the transition to EV, there was a lot of early adopters who wanted electric cars, but there weren't many options for them to buy one. But now manufacturers are increasingly pivoting their output to electric vehicles. Is there a real sense of this now that actually there's going to be more supply, and therefore we need to actually make sure we're educating the public to adopt it quickly?
Well, that's right. And I mean, just to give you a sense, currently right now, about 40% of the vehicles that we sell in Canada are pickup trucks. We have a full battery electric pickup truck that is coming this year. It's the notorious brand Hummer, and it will give you 1,000 horsepower, and it's all battery electric. And that is just one of a series of SUVs, small cars, SUVs, but also pickup trucks that will give people what they need in terms of functionality. But the technology will be there to get them in an all-electric format. So we're really excited about that. The one thing we know is that when our customers go and make the shift to our electric vehicles, like the Chevrolet Bolt, or this Hummer EV, or the new Silverado EV pickup that we'll be bringing forward, they don't go back. They love driving electric vehicles. The pickup is extraordinary. And you can build your lifestyle in a way that is very, very manageable, and you will really prefer it, and you're going to save money when you operate an electric vehicle.
Great. Well, a Hummer's an example of a big, heavy vehicle, but a transit bus is even more so. And Paul, if I may ask you, obviously transit buses are obviously big vehicles. They work hard every day. And as Emmanuel pointed out, they're actually driving in among the communities. Be interested to know what New Flyer's view and your view is of how quickly the transition is able to take place for more heavy duty vehicle applications, and what New Flyer's plans are for reaching a full electric fleet, if indeed you have put that milestone in as yet.
Well, we're in a different place than David described, because transit is absolutely perfect for electrification. In that, it's a government-funded, essential service. We have known routes, we have known capacity of people. The vehicles make themselves home every night. We have government mandates now. We have government funding in Canada and the U.S. now to really try and push and proliferate. Electrification of transit is not if, it's when. And so the reality is, given the installed fleet, given the challenges associated with putting charging infrastructure, where do you get the energy from, transition of your current fleets, to all these other issues, we see it far more as an evolution over the next 15 years than a revolution. Just imagine an average transit agency that's got a couple hundred transit buses. They have trained mechanics, they have spare parts, they've got depots laid out in a certain way, they have fuel farms. Putting 2 or 3 electric buses in a trial or a pilot environment is relatively simple. We can get the energy to it, we can learn from it, we can deploy it. As it starts to become 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 50% of a customer's fleet, there's a massive physical challenge and dynamic associated with people and people capital as skills to manage and maintain existing fleets and new fleets. And of course, what we've learned very quickly is no one size fits all. We don't have to provide infinite range because, again, in a public transit environment, we know the routes that these buses are going on. What we have to do is figure out, and an operator's dynamics around what the current fleet looks like, what the politics of the local environment, whether there's an initiative around battery electric or energy sources or fuel cell type dynamics. You've got topography, hills are the enemy, if you will, of an electric vehicle going up and how much energy that takes, especially when it's a 30,000 pound vehicle full of people. The environment, we've got buses in service in some cities where 50 or 60% of the energy, a bus going 3 or 4 miles an hour, is used for actual HVAC. And so it clearly diminishes the ultimate range, but you got to keep the bus cool and heated in the winter and so forth. Route structure and all those things. And so quite honestly, it may sound simplistic, but the bus is kind of the easy part. All of our companies, Emmanuel's, mine, and other, we've really started to evolve the fleets. As I said, 20% of what we're building this year is zero emission. Every product that we provide today, we can provide it with a diesel, a natural gas, a hybrid, or a battery electric, and now fuel cell. And so the ability to have common platforms with multiple propulsions allows that customer to think about transitioning of their fleet. The other part of it is because they're government-funded fleets or public taxpayer dollars, it's not like we're going to be able to take all the existing vehicles off the road one day and put all electric on the next day. There's economic life and value left in those vehicles, which goes back to my comment about transition. So we're really excited with a customer's adoption. The charging approach, whether it's at depot or en route or range extenders like fuel cells, is a big choice in helping a customer diagnose what's the right thing to be done. And then quite honestly, the reality of it is, imagine a depot that's got, 500 buses that needs to charge in a fairly concentrated period at night. Whatever the megawatts that are needed is a massive amount of energy. And so I think both the transit agency's ability to adopt and deploy combined with the available energy is what's going to pace adoption. But again, it is not if in our world, it is going to happen, and it's happening right now.
So, Paul, you mentioned that 20% of your output right now is zero-emission vehicles. When you manufacture the last combustion vehicle, let's say, how many years is that vehicle likely to continue in service? And maybe you might want to predict what year that might be when you sell the last combustion vehicle, if I could perhaps put you on the spot there.
Yeah, no, it's a tricky one. And of course, whether you're in Canada or the US, we have different cities with different mandates. By such and such a time, there'll be zero emission and so forth. An average transit bus in our world in Canada, the US, is kind of designed for a 12 to a 20 year operating life. And I must admit, a bus that comes out of TTC service or New York City after 15 years is a pretty tired asset and really doesn't have any, if any, residual value. So we're really starting to see, I would think by 2028 or so, we're going to be in a scenario where the vast majority, if not all of our production, is going to be away from ICE or internal combustion engines, so that we start to see fleets that are not just transitioned to and all buying zero emission, but the entire fleet is zero emission by something like 2040 or so. So the next 4 or 5 years is going to be very interesting to watch the pace of adoption. And again, it's not the technological dynamic around the bus as much as it is all the other elements of deployment.
Well, that's exciting to hear within 6-7 years. Emmanuel, let's talk about it from the driver experience and the user experience. What's the feedback that you get when you have a bus driver who's been driving diesel all their lives and then they transition to electric, and what feedback do you get from the passengers of those vehicles as well?
Well, let's say it. They both just love them. I have never heard any negative comment. Typically, the drivers, they are all very happy, and sometimes they, when they come at work, what we have heard is they are extremely happy when they know that they will be driving one of the electric bus. And I'm quite sure that Paul heard the same thing at New Flyer as well. But and for the driver, it's already an important role that they have, because they are moving people to go to school, to work, for their appointment. So I would say that drivers, they already have a very important role in the society. But I think that they know that they are in a much bigger role when they are driving electric vehicle, because they can really contribute to have a cleaner city, and which is safe also, and it is also a smooth drive. So the comment again are extremely positive. And I would say that for the drivers, one important thing, however, is really to make sure that they have the appropriate training. because you have to adapt the way you're driving, and also you don't start an electric bus the same way than you do with a diesel. There's a few things to adapt. It's not totally different, but there's a few things that you have to know. And also, if you want to optimize your battery, regardless of the weather, you also have to drive also a little bit differently, because you will be using the regenerative braking, for example, which is really important. And the range that you will be doing with your bus within a day will depend in some, partially at least, depending on how the driver is driving. So this is really important. And when we think about the public in general, well, people also, I think that it is very attractive to them, not only to the young people, to everybody. And when the first electric transit buses have been on the street, what we were hearing is, we hear a little noise that, is it normal? It's just that with a diesel, they were not hearing all those noise. And now they really pay attention to all those things, and they can hear what someone is saying, maybe in the front of the bus, and they were not used to it, but at the end, they are very, very happy. So it's really nice to hear all those comments.
That's great. And I guess for many people, their first ride in an electric vehicle may in fact be an electric bus if they're not in a position to buy one themselves.
Yeah, but now there is more and more of those buses. So, of course, people get used to it in some cities, but the market is really to develop. We, like at Novabus, we already deliver electric buses in some of the city in Canada with the first model. Now we have a new long-range model, and we are still in Orlando at the American Public Transit Association Expo that is happening right now in Orlando. And, it attracts the people. And I would say that you can see a lot of electric buses at the Expo. Of course, it's not only on our side. But again, I think that we have a lot of positive comments from everybody.
That's great. And Paul, I'd be interested to understand the experience of working with these vehicles from a maintenance and operations point of view. Obviously, we're talking more about kind of fleet operations dynamics, and you're dealing with transit agencies and municipalities. Could you maybe highlight kind of what the pathway looks like to having those back-end operations transition?
Well, it in itself is not a trivial activity, because the conventional mechanic and job classifications of a normal internal combustion engine inside a maintenance depot and so forth has to change. I can't underscore what Emmanuel talked about. We've determined that a good, efficient, skilled electric driver very seldom touches the brakes. And so the amount of energy that they can get out of the batteries can be up as much as 20% more than somebody that's either jerking or starting and stopping quickly and so forth. You go inside the depot, and so it's not just expertise around the batteries and the high voltage dynamic on the bus, but also the whole charging infrastructure, and whether they're charging at depot or whether they're charging en route, or in some cases catenary charging and so forth. There's a lot of skill sets that a transit agency did not have to deal with before. And the number of relationships before somebody fill up their fuel tanks and then they filled up the vehicles. Well, now you have a whole dynamic with utilities and companies like Schneider that have deep software expertise capability to optimize the system. And I really like that expression that both Frederick and I use around this ecosystem, because it is no longer just about the bus, and there's an optimization dynamic. The skill sets of retraining our workforce to design and make vehicles, retraining the transit operator, drivers, maintainers, engineers, sourcing people. And then the reality of ensuring that all of these subcontractors or the people that make components for our vehicles all are part of that ecosystem requires a tremendous amount of cooperation, probably more than we've ever had before. The other dynamic that's really exciting about what's going on here, and this applies to whether it's General Motors or a bus company like ours, the new people that we need to come into our workforce no longer can just think about it as, putting wheels on a bus or one task. The whole dynamic around how the electricity is stored, how it's used, how it's distributed through the vehicle becomes a massive, exciting environment for our world, for young people to say, this is no longer our expression, a bread box going down the road with diesel smoke coming out of the back. It's a really exciting time to be able to start to go into the technical vocational schools and high schools to talk to people about a career in quite honestly is a rocket-sized environment. There's software, there's technologies, there's robotics, there's autonomous. Pretty exciting times. Pretty daunting in terms of the transition in front of us as an industry, as well as for our operators.
That's great. There's a lot for us to dive into there. And let's go right away to charging and charging infrastructure. And Frederick, it would be good to hear your input on this. In Canada right now, we're at roughly about 5% of new vehicles sold, light-duty vehicles sold are electric. And so the charging infrastructure we have right now is merely a kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we're going to need to meet the growing number of electric vehicles hitting the road. But Paul hit on some critical challenges of electrifying a depot that's got 500 buses in it. And how realistic, Frederick, is it to be able to put power into a place like that?
Yes. So certainly what Paul has just shared with us is how important the transformation is for the fleet manager in doing this electrification. In this process, which Paul described very well, being a stepwise approach, starting with few vehicle and then expanding, it is certainly at one point of the process where there will be this very important question: where are the electrons going to come from to support the larger scale of the electrification plan? And I would say that in all the transformation, the energy infrastructure is probably one of the most complex transformation. And it really make a big difference from operating a diesel fleet system. And what makes it very unique is that to being able to run this zero emission fleet, you really need to have a fully integrated system to operate that. And in there, you need to take into consideration the EV, the battery characteristic, the optimization of the route and usage, the charging system, obviously at the depot, but as well, will there be en route some other point of charging? And then this very important energy infrastructure. And on this one, I think there's some very important point that we need to talk about is at the point of connection, obviously, let's say here at the bus depot, will the utility supply have the capacity for the 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 megawatt that would be required? Not only the capacity is important, but is the resiliency of the supply good enough? Because in the morning, the buses, they need to hit the road and being able to do their job. So as well, to take into consideration, what is the green content from the supply of energy at the point of connection? Because I think everyone would agree that if we're backing up diesel generator to charge our buses, I think we're not winning here. So what we see is that very often what we end up doing is leveraging, obviously, as much as we can, the grid infrastructure and availability of power, but we are combining that with renewable energy storage to being really able to optimize the availability of power, the quality of supply. And so that's something very important. Into all this process as well, there is a very important point. Where is the capital money is going to come from to invest into this energy infrastructure? Obviously, there are, and certainly would require more incentive from the government. But I think it does create an opportunity as well for private investors that are investing in the new charging infrastructure, new energy infrastructure required to being able to fuel this electrification of transport. That's why Schneider Electric, we have created a joint venture with Carlyle, really being able to combine in one organization that we call Alpha Structure, both the investment and the technology expertise to really go and offer an end-to-end solution, removing the complexity in building an infrastructure that will be able to evolve in time. And we were very pleased to have announced recently the first phase of the Montgomery County electrification project nearby Washington. It's a first phase, 70 buses out of 500 buses. So we're very pleased to being part of that. And we see that it's not anymore a technology problem, but it's how we are approaching it as a system approach to being able to deliver the desired quality of supply.
So Frederick, as a fleet operator or manager, that could sound quite like a complicated exercise to go through that full evaluation and transition process. electric. Just, like, I don't know if you're able to quantify, like, just how demanding is the change that we're asking for, or that is going to be required of these people in learning everything they've been used to and been trained on in dealing with combustion vehicles. You've been at the front line, obviously, helping people make this transition. How onerous is it on these operators?
Well, in terms of, a dollar sign, it's one thing which I can come back to, but I think it's a question of time. It's a question of being able to anticipate as well, the evolution of the grid. So it's quite complex. We have the investment for the buses. I think it's probably fair to say the investment you're making on the buses, there is a good percentage of that will be required to adapt the garage, the energy infrastructure to being able to supply. So it is a significant investment to being able to adapt the overall buses, depot, and garage assets, the skills, as David mentioned, but as well, a significant investment as well to make sure that we have reliability and support to make sure that the electricity is always going to be there to make sure that the buses can go and hit the road the next day. So.
Thank you. I'd like to briefly touch on alternative fuels. So obviously we're talking about battery electric vehicles here. Paul, you mentioned that you produce fuel cell vehicles and other forms of propulsion. I'm interested in the degree to which you are focused on or see the future with alternative fuels, and also perhaps a question for Emmanuel after Paul, if I may.
Well, just to comment on kind of the reality, the political pressure, which in our world is going to drive the funding, has such a laser focus on zero emission, not near zero, but zero emission. And so the end game, the math will work in terms of the capital cost upfront for the charging infrastructure for the electric vehicles or the fuel cell vehicles will pay for themselves over the economic life of those vehicles in terms of reduced maintenance and operating costs. That's the good news. And therefore, the time spent on other internal combustion type options, biodiesel, and today a lot of our fleet, we probably deliver, 35-40% of our vehicles that we deliver today are compressed natural gas. Those are still being sold and will be sold for the next, half a dozen years or so. But I think what we're going to see ourselves is truly orienting us as a lead industry to drive all other industries, again, because it's government funded, on zero emission, whether it's battery electric or fuel cell electric, or in some cases, we still sell electric trolleys like Vancouver or Seattle and San Francisco that have overhead trolleys where they've already made the infrastructure investment. I think that's going to take on such political will and pressure that some of these other things will exist for a period of time, but are not going to be the end game, at least in our public transit world.
Thank you. Emmanuel and Volvo Group's perception on this?
Well, first at Novabus we offer all type of buses, including the CNG and the hybrid, which are already cleaner than the diesel. And as Paul said, also it will take years before, considering the lifetime of the buses, it will take time before the fleet transition entirely to electric buses. At Novabus, we decided to focus on the electric buses because we believe that it is more appropriate for city, because the distance is kind of shorter. You can take your bus, go at the depot at night to charge it, or during the day, depending of the routes and the transit agency. But also the new LFSC Plus that we have, the long-range bus, it has the dual charging like many other OEM. So it allows to either charge at the depot at night or use a pantograph where en route you can charge the bus, give a boost to your battery. And then it becomes quite easy, to just use your electric bus. But when it comes to the other alternative fuel, like for example, with the hydrogen fuel cell, this is not something that we see as something that is being needed. And for the Volvo Group, it's also the vision. So for the Volvo Group, everything that is more within the city, transit buses or other type of vehicle, it's mainly about battery electric vehicle. And when you think about a long distance to do, like with your truck, where maybe the infrastructure are not so easy to find, and for example, a truck, you will not necessarily go back at the garage at night. You can be on the road for 7 days or regardless of the number of days, and you don't have necessarily the facility to recharge. So then it's really more about the fuel cell, and the Volvo Group believe that both should be a complement. And Volvo Group also created a joint venture with Daimler earlier this year. Also, it's a fuel-centric, which is really to develop this area. But we don't believe that, at least on our side, that it will be something to look at in the near future for transit buses.
Okay, thank you. And David, my impression is that General Motors is very focused on battery electric vehicles. Do alternative fuels play a role in your plan?
Well, we have a very significant hydrogen fuel cell technology, and we fully intend to go out and use it for trains and semi-haulers. And this transition is not just about going electric. This is a massive transformation of business opportunities, and Canada has just an incredible opportunity ahead of it in terms of this change. So, for example, the battery is the key thing in an electric vehicle. But the battery management system is about software. We have the best software people in the world here in Toronto and in Montreal. I mean, that's a really important part about getting the range out of the types of vehicles that we have. It's a variety of different technologies. For us, we're going straight to full battery electric. We're not doing hybrids. We're going straight to full battery electric vehicles. So we're going to be dependent on bringing consumers over to changing the infrastructure. We're going to help with that. But we know that people are going to love the change when we get there. It's going to take a decade, and we'll get there, and the climate will be the beneficiary.
Great, and as will all of we, let's hope. And David, you touched on Toronto and Quebec being centres of great talent pools for technology. And obviously, this is an international event here today, and for anybody who's thinking of launching a business related to the EV industry and serving the North American market, perhaps you could expand on why Canada is a good place to do that, and some of the attributes of the Canada-US-Mexico agreement that help enable that.
Yeah, you can't understand the North American auto industry unless you go back to the 1960s and realize that we did the Auto Pact, which brought together the North American manufacturing and sales of our vehicles. And so we don't make vehicles in Canada for Canadians. We make them for North Americans. And so we have a market 10 times the size of what we have in Canada. And the American and Mexican production also comes here to Canada. It's done on an integrated basis so that we can be as effective as we can. You come and invest in Canada as part of that North American market. You have the richest, biggest market in the world. And it's a really exciting opportunity to be part of that. And there are so many entry points now with the technology changing, whether it's in hardware or software or in services or in the like. And, in electric vehicles, buses, it's incredible. The time right now is one that we'll always remember. And for young kids coming into this industry, wow. I mean, you can just build an incredible career.
And just before we came on stage, you mentioned a statistic about the number of vehicles that are manufactured in Canada that actually leave Canada.
Yeah, we export 90% of the vehicles made in the factories in Canada generally to the United States. Wow. And that's just a reflection of that integrated nature that we have. My company buys $3 billion worth of Canadian parts and supplies to go into our American vehicles. Hundreds of millions of dollars going into the Chevrolet Bolt, which is made in Michigan, comes from Ontario in terms of putting that vehicle on the road. So it's a very tightly integrated business. We need to do the change together. That'll have some challenges. It is having some challenges as we go forward. But we build things together. And as we adopt a new supply chain to go with those electric buses, electric cars, we're going to need an awful lot of batteries, and batteries are going to need an awful lot of minerals. And what do we have here in Canada? We have an awful lot of minerals. So I think there's tremendous opportunity, and we need to learn how to process those, how to continue to do R&D, develop things. The holy grail of the auto sector for electrification for us is to take a battery, cut the cost in half, and double the range. You do that, you win, get a lot of new customers, and everybody's going to be happy.
Great. And Paul, New Flyer is based in Winnipeg, Manitoba, but you have significant operations elsewhere in Canada and the US. And I just wonder if you could share really how that works for the business and why you continue to be headquartered in Winnipeg.
Well, it's similar to David in some respects in terms of we're really lucky about the expertise, the skill set, hardware, software, design, all these things that are available in Canada. In our world, we have a little bit of a challenge in that in the United States, to sell a public transit bus to an agency, we must have U.S. content rules and Buy America rules. So, our industry is set up where we design, develop, test. We do all the brainy stuff in Canada, but we make in Canada for Canadian markets and we make in the U.S. for U.S. markets. So we don't really have much implications from the Canadian-U.S. MCA agreement. Ours is more around a kind of a defined public essential industry that has certain procurement requirements and local labor issues as well as local supply issues. And so we're very much integrated the way David described in terms of the supply chain. But for our business, and I know Emmanuel's is the same, all of the real brainy stuff and expertise is done here in Canada, and it's a great place to be able to develop and grow a business. And we're fortunate now to be able to do that now with a global footprint with the acquisitions we've done in the last couple of years.
Great, thank you. I can see that time is getting tight, so I'm going to attempt to cover off two topics in the remaining time. Frederick, Paul mentioned a lot about the talent requirements that are going to be required from this new industry. You've experienced working for Schneider Electric in Asia Pac and in Europe, and I wonder if you could just highlight some of the attributes of the Canadian workforce, given that experience, and some of the new skills that are going to be required. Obviously, your business is right in the heart of hiring these people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very much, in phase what has been said by the other panelists. The future is electric, and we are in Canada very well positioned to seize that opportunity. First, we have great education system with top universities across the country that are adapting to the energy landscape. But the fact is the electric sector workforce is aging itself, and we need to attract a younger generation to join the force. But at the same time, we need to adapt to the new reality of the electricity domain. There are new subjects that are out there that are extremely important, and it must be taught at the earlier age. We're talking about battery energy storage, cybersecurity, DC system and automation that we need to equip our workforce, upskilling the existing workforce, reskilling as well the workforce. But we absolutely need to be sizing this opportunity and making the message into the younger generation much more appealing, because the future is great, especially in the field of the electrification of our economy and our society. So, but there are some need as the electric sector workforce is aging. So.
Great, thank you, Frederick. And in the last minute, Emmanuel, if I can come to you to cover off this topic, David mentioned Canada's potential for an integrated supply chain, and I'd like to invite you to expand on that, but also to talk about recycling, battery recycling, because of the capabilities, obviously, that we have here in Canada.
Yeah, well, David, Frederick, and Paul, they all say how the ecosystem in Canada is so unique. We are so lucky to have this, from the minerals to the battery, to the electric vehicle, and to the circularity, so reusing or recycling the battery. So this is really something that is, the Canada, I think, that knows that this is really a strength and want to focus on it. And also the whole supply chain. We have a lot of Canadian supplier, and exactly like Paul mentioned, we build buses in Canada for the Canadian market, and we use a lot of Canadian supplier as well, even if there is not necessarily a requirement for that. But I think that everything that is happening now, it creates really a unique opportunity for the knowledge economy. And I agree with Frederick, it attracts the young people, but I think also that it is a very nice opportunity for improving diversity, attracting, for example, women in the transportation and manufacturing industry. When you look at all those vehicles in the street, I think that we really have something here.
I would agree, and what a great note to end on. And I'd like to say an enormous thank you to all of our panelists, Frederick, Paul, Emmanuel, and David. And I'd like to thank Investing Canada and the Toronto Global Forum for inviting me here to moderate today and for putting on this great session. And thanks everybody for listening.